Hello and welcome to the Common Sense Gospel. I am Danny Simmons.
And I'm Kurt Norbert.
And we have a very exciting announcement to give to all of you today. We've gotten some feedback on the trivia questions that we used to ask. Sam Tipton and I used to exchange 2 trivia questions. And the rules are that the person who's being asked has never seen the question, doesn't know what's coming. And so we're having to answer the question on the spot. And we feel like that's only fair because the same thing's happening to you. If you're out listening wherever you are, no one's prepped you or talked about the perfect answer, and so we want to keep that playing field level. And we're going to hear these questions for the first time, and we're just going to see how we do. The other thing about that is that it drives us to want to know more, or if a subject comes up where we're clueless on it, that's good for us because if it's in the Bible, maybe we should look at that. Maybe we should study that. So there's a lot of good that goes with that. And of course, I think we all agree the best thing ever about trivia questions is knowing the answer perfectly. I mean, that really feels good. So we're going to get back to that. We're going to do it at the end of each show from here on out. But we wanted you to know that and be thinking about those trivia questions that might be asked and whether or not you're ready to answer those questions. Today, our subject is betrayal, and we're going to look at the one who's known really since the time of Christ for betrayal. It would be a terrible thing if someone came to you and said, "You are a Judas." That would be a terrible, terrible thing. And so we'll talk about Judas a little bit and then make that application for ourselves, how that type of person, that mentality of being a Judas, how terrible that can be, whether you're the victim of Judas or you yourself are standing in that role of betraying someone that you should care about. What is it about betrayal, Kurt, that we need to know before we get going?
Well, oftentimes when I'm studying a subject, one of my study habits is to look up a word and see what it means. And it was actually instructive in this case, not that I didn't know what betray means, but it did straighten out a misconception I had, and so I'll explain that. The word betray basically comes from a Greek word that means to deliver up. In fact, the old King James translates it that way when Jesus talks about Judas delivering him up. That is the phrase that is used. It means to give over into the hands of another. And the reason that corrected me is I was trying to think of examples of betrayal other than Judas in the scripture, and I instantly thought of Peter. And then when I looked up this definition, I realized, no, Peter's not an example of betrayal. He did not deliver Jesus up. He is an example of denial.
Right.
And Jesus even makes that distinction. He says, "Peter, you'll deny me," but he told Judas, or indicated Judas will betray me.
Yeah.
So that he understood that difference. But Judas does stand out as the betrayer because we can see his progression in the scriptures. As we've discussed in preparing this, Jesus knowingly chose a traitor. Not that he was going to make Judas betray him, or that from the foundation of the world God had ordained this individual, Judas Iscariot, to betray the Son. He chose a person who had a character, who had the lack of integrity, who had the ability to commit this deed. And as we talked, this must have weighed heavy on Jesus for 3 years. But especially repugnant in the whole account is when Judas offered his services to the Sanhedrin. What will you give me and I'll deliver him up to you? Then leading them to the garden, the apprehension force, the police, whatever the group that the council gave to him, because he knew Jesus would be there with the disciples, then identifying him for the arresters and telling them how he would identify him. Yeah. The one that you see me kiss, right. He's the one sees him. And so the scriptures they tell us as he came up, he says, "Greetings, Rabbi," and he kissed him. And Jesus' response was, "Judas, are you betraying me with a kiss?" What a sad, what a deep pain that must have been to Jesus, to use a sign of friendship as the sign that this is the one I'm betraying. This is the one you need to seize. And of course, in talking about God, Jesus knew this would be the case, Psalm 41:9 is quoted in John 13, Jesus knowing that one who ate at my table would lift up his hand against me. A friend who ate at my table would lift up his hand against me. So that gave me a lot to think about. And the only other example, going back to Old Testament or to Bible examples, the only other example I could come up with of a notable traitor would be Ahithophel, when Absalom rebelled against the kingship of David, his father.
Right.
We're told Ahithophel was apparently one of David's most important counselors. 2 Samuel 16:23 tells us that his counsel was of such a stature that it was as if someone inquired of an oracle of God. So probably one of David's sharpest reactions was when he was informed that Ahithophel is with Absalom. He actually cried out to God, "O Lord, defeat the counsel of Ahithophel." This was a very serious threat to David.
Yeah.
And if we want to know how David felt, Psalm 55 outlines that for us. It shows us his grief and the turmoil in his soul. Not only that here he was being rebelled against and chased out of Jerusalem, but he specifically, I believe, speaks of Ahithophel and the effect that this had on him. And of course, this is poetic language. The Psalms are poems. But especially in verse 12, David says, "It is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it.
Right.
Nor is it one who hates me who has magnified himself against me. Then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked to the house of God in the throng." So this betrayal went deep. It hurt David.
Yeah.
And so here you have a trusted companion, one in whom David put a great deal of confidence, respected and sought his advice and his counsel, who then betrays David, and we see the turmoil in his soul. And I think that's a picture. We see a parallel of that with Judas and Jesus.
Yeah.
Because, as we talked about, Judas was a full-fledged apostle of Jesus Christ. He was one of the 12 that Jesus chose, knowing that he would be the one who would lift up his heel against him, lift up his hand against him, and betray him. And yet, Jesus chose him. Jesus taught him. He confided in him, treated him as he did the other apostles.
Of course.
Knowing what would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned him being there the whole time. When the ministry of Christ begins, these 12 men are selected. In Luke 6, there's an interesting picture there because, we wonder about Judas. Why did he do that? Why did he behave that way? Why did he lose confidence in Jesus? Or whatever that might be. Luke 6 and verse 12, as you had said earlier, much thought and prayer goes into the selection of these 12 men. Mm-hmm. And he knows he's choosing one that is a devil. He says that in John chapter 6. But in Luke 6, it says, "Now it came to pass in those days that he went out to the mountain to pray and continued all night in prayer to God. And when it was day, he called his disciples to himself, and from them he chose 12, whom he also named apostles. Simon, whom he also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, and Simon called the Zealot, Judas the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who also became a traitor. Just an interesting point when you look at the list of apostles as they're named in the Gospels and in the book of Acts. You know what I'm going to say?
Yeah.
Peter's always first.
Yep.
Judas is always last.
last.
Always. There's never a change in that as far as those names that are laid out for us. But what's interesting in Luke 6 is, so let's say now he's selected Judas. He's going to be one of the 12 amidst all these other disciples who were there and following Jesus. Verse 17, the very next verse. And he came down with them and stood on a level place with a crowd of his disciples and a great multitude of people from all Judea and Jerusalem, and from the seacoast of Tyre and Sidon, who came to hear him and to be healed of their diseases, as well as those who were tormented with unclean spirits. And they were healed, and the whole multitude sought to touch him, for power went out from him and healed them all. And we know the 12 apostles are there, Judas, because that's who we're talking about. He is there now immediately after being selected, and for the first time as being moved into this office of apostleship, that he's watching his master in this miraculous power to heal simply through touch, as is given to us here. They came to touch him and to be healed, and it says that power went out from him. He's an eyewitness to that. And Judas had never seen this before. That I guarantee. For all these ailments and the blind and the crippled and everyone, all sicknesses, diseases, and torments, as Matthew tells us, they're just immediately dealt with. They're immediately gone. People are perfectly made whole and perfectly healed. And we like to think that would just change my life to watch that happen and to know that not only is he able to do it, but I walk with him every day. I guess for me, it would be a point where I say, it's okay if I have a cough, or, I'm not worried if I get a bump on my skin. Now I'm with Jesus, right? Jesus has the ability, because he's watched it, and I'm just thinking the mental process I would go through. I'd be a lot less concerned about someone coughing it on my face, because I'm an apostle. I'm with Jesus, and until this comes to an end or it ends the way he wants, I am good to go. And I mean, even that alone would be an amazing feeling. But through this process of walking with Jesus, and even Judas himself being given this power to heal, to cast out demons, and to have the ability to preach the kingdom of heaven was granted to Judas, right? When Jesus sent out the 12. And then when those apostles come back to him, they're excited and they say, Lord, even the demons are subject to us. And so Judas is in that number too. He's able to do those great things himself because Christ has given them the royal right, exousia, to work those miracles. And in all of that, in Jesus granting him power to go and preach the right message, that this same man is going to turn on him. It's got to be such an awful feeling.
Well, you make an interesting point that got some wheels creaking along up in here. Judas was fully one of the 12. I've never heard that disputed.
Sure.
He was a chosen apostle of Jesus Christ. Spent 3 years with him. Just as with the other apostles, he saw the marvelous works that he did. He heard every word of truth that came out of Jesus' mouth. He saw how he dealt with everybody, the poor, the sick, those who came to him, and his enemies. And yet, somehow, that didn't affect him the right way. Mm-hmm. Now, all the apostles, we can see, had, I'll just call it a level of cluelessness.
Yes.
And I can't see any reason why I would have been any different from them if I were in that situation.
Right.
You're with the Son of God, who is doing these overwhelming things. And you're trying to put all this together. And in fact, he's teaching some things that don't fit with what you've been taught all your life as a Jew, raised up in Jewish society under the law and under the influence of the Pharisees and what have you. And so you're trying to process all this stuff. And we see their confusion at times and their lack of just getting it. And two of the things that really illustrate that, because they were ongoing problems, is they would argue who's going to be the greatest among them. So they have this carnal viewpoint of the kingdom.
Yep.
And Jesus would come right out and say, the Son of Man's going up to Jerusalem. He's going to be delivered into the hands of sinners and killed, but he's going to rise the third day. And it just goes right over their head. So they all had this level of a lack of understanding. They just didn't see the whole picture yet. They're trying to learn all of this. But what is it that made Judas different from the others? Because there was never an indication that the other 11 had any intent to ever do harm to Jesus.
Yeah.
But we see early on, of course, Jesus chose the one who would betray him, but later in the ministry, we see the heart of Judas Iscariot being exposed. And I think that's what separated him. It was the condition of his heart. Yes, he heard it all. He saw it all. He was with all the other apostles. He did those things. I'm sure he was with the 12 who came back and said, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. Amazing things he could do because of Jesus' authority and the work that Jesus had given him to do as an apostle. But that didn't, the condition of his heart clouded that and overrode that. And I think that's such an important lesson for us.
Yes.
There was intent there in the heart of Judas, where there was not in the other 11. They didn't always get it, but they were loyal to Jesus.
That's right.
And even Peter, even if everyone else denies you, Lord, I will not. I'll die for you. No, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times tonight before the rooster crows.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't Peter's intent. But under the pressure of the moment, he succumbed, but we see him repenting. And yet all the time with Judas, there was that intent. And even when he came to a realization, he chose not to repent. And that's kind of the sad end of his story. But I think really it's the condition of the heart. And that is the danger for us also.
That's right. The condition of the heart, and no matter how much debate goes on about Judas and why he did what he did, that really is irrelevant. We can all look and see that his heart was clouded, as you said. His heart was drifting away from Jesus despite the signs and all those great things that were happening. And there was plenty there to wonder, is this guy, even John the Baptist says, are you the one we should look for? Should we look for another one? Mm-hmm. So there were moments when it was not as clear as they wanted it to be. But the condition of his heart is what allowed him to move away from Jesus. And that's where we have to make the application. That I can justify betraying a dear friend of mine because I've built a case in my own mind. Now, I haven't been willing to share that with anybody, but I've got plenty of reason to turn this guy over, or however that works out for us. And that is something has happened inside of us that should have never happened, and it's the heart is not where it should be. A godly heart would never behave in that way or justify itself to do wrong or to cause harm to befall anyone around us within our power. And so, that there's gossip and slander and all kinds of things that fit under that umbrella. Whatever I would do on purpose to hurt or to offend someone that it should be a friend of mine or that I should care about. Judas, as you said, he's moving, the scriptures show us kind of just little pictures of him either revealing his own heart, his condition, or moving further away from the Lord. And one of those great moments where it's clear to see, because John makes sure we see it, is in John 12, when Mary comes in and breaks the alabaster flask of oil. She anoints Jesus, and Judas speaks up. The other Gospels say that the disciples complained, but John brings Judas out of that group and says, no, he's leading the way here on this. And he says in verse 5, why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? So now again, we're watching him. On the surface, that sounds like, we could have given 300 denarii to the poor. That's actually a good thing. That's a year's wage. But John clears it up in verse 6. This he said, not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and he had the money box and he used to take what was put into it. So again, we're thinking about Jesus and there's money missing out of the bag. Does Jesus know how much money is supposed to be in the bag? It's insane.
Yeah.
And not only does he know how much money is supposed to be in the bag, he knows who took it and he knows what he spent it on.
Yeah.
So this guy's already working under some type of cover of darkness. He's the treasurer. That responsibility has been given to him either by casting lots or just appointed by Jesus, or they voted him in or whatever. And he's completely abused that. And so these little pictures, there's more than just that. But that's a good one because Jesus says, leave her alone. Mm-hmm. And he goes on to say that as long as the gospel's preached, this moment in time will be spoken of. This good deed will not go unnoticed. And here we are, looking at these passages, and Judas has revealed himself, and she has revealed who she is, that there was no price too high to honor her Lord, where Judas was all about himself. Mm-hmm. And that is the heart of a Judas. This is going to benefit me somehow, and so I am going to do it. Mark 14, too, I just want to mention it because the way Mark gives this to us, Mark 14 and verse 10, says, then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray him to them. And when they heard it, they were glad, and they promised to give him money. So he sought how he might conveniently betray him, and whatever that means, conveniently betray Jesus. But in verse 10, Matthew, Mark, and Luke in this moment all say Judas Iscariot, one of the 12. Mm-hmm. So these gospel writers confirm once again that he is very close to Jesus. He's one of the most privileged men to ever walk the face of the earth.
Yeah. And it really is amazing that, the point you raise, as we had discussed this, I brought up, when Judas led the crowd to Jesus to be arrested, he had seen the power of Jesus. He knew what Jesus could do with a crowd. And as you pointed out in our discussion, at one previous time when Jesus was threatened by a crowd, he just walked through the midst and went his way.
Right.
And here in the example there you gave out of John, where he's complaining about how this could have been given to the poor, but he actually was coveting the money.
Yep.
That shows again just how dangerous this kind of a heart can be. Because, like we've pointed out, he has seen Jesus. He knows who Jesus is. He knows what he can do. He has seen him read the hearts of his enemies.
Right.
He knows what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. And yet somehow he does not apply that to himself. I can take a handful of denarii out of the bag here. Nobody's going to know about that. Really?
How could you
Who are you with? I'll lead this group to Jesus. Haven't you seen what he can deal? How he can deal with people?
Yeah.
You've seen his power. The danger of a sinful heart is that it blinds us to who Jesus is. Even if we've walked with him, we start losing sight, and our reason and our spiritual vision is clouded to where we can deceive ourselves into thinking, I'm getting away with something.
Yeah.
I'm on top of this one. Nobody else knows about it.
Yeah.
Jesus does.
That's right. Yeah, ever since you started thinking about it, he's known that was beginning to be born into your life, your mind, your heart, and now it's working itself out. So yeah, this is a great point. He has to know these things, and yet, maybe paints himself as the good guy. He's going to help the council. They were glad when he came to them and said, I think I can get him for you. Maybe he's got it where he thinks, everyone agrees with me, at least in his little world. I don't know. There's none of that's given to us, but that's how the mind for self-justification works. That I need someone on my side. I need to know that once I do all these things, it'll be for the greater good. Once this will shine some light on so-and-so, and then he'll do this or that. No, that's not the way to handle that. You don't betray people. And we do want to talk just for a moment about the practical application of betrayal. Kurt and I agree that you're either one or the other. If betrayal is going on, you're either being betrayed or you are betraying. And so for both, we want to just comment on that. First of all, if you're the one who's betraying, we've hit it as hard as we can. You got a heart problem.
Mm-hmm. Do not be a Judas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a problem of the heart.
Yeah.
And if you are in the middle of about to take some type of vengeance or turn someone over or expose something that could be handled in a more godly way, you may be way into this just like Judas was and need to hear this very thing to say, okay, I got to rethink this because most of me knows this isn't right. And now we've talked about it today, and we want that to help you and to guide you into taking the appropriate steps. Usually they're more difficult, but the right steps will always be of benefit to you and make you stronger as one of God's people. So that's worth your time. Don't be a Judas. Do not betray those who have befriended you. Do not betray those who trust in you. So the other side of that is if you've been betrayed, and there may be more of us fitting that, I would hope. Mm. Not because we want you to be betrayed, but because we don't want you betraying others. But one of the strongest cases for betrayal would be the marriage situation. Mm-hmm. There's so much there, and it's so painful. If you've been betrayed by your beloved, you can go back to the altar where you made those promises to each other and your families there. We can run that through our mind and really get to a deep and dark place. How could they? How could they have done this to me? We swore everything that we would protect each other, and now I've been victimized by the one who said they would protect me. And so that obviously very complicated and very difficult, but we do want to have that brief but honest conversation about, what would you say, Kurt? Not leaving Jesus out of the conversation necessarily, but just saying to someone who's been damaged that deeply, how do you help them to move on and to continue to serve the Lord when someone's yanked the rug out from under them like that?
Well, that's a good question. It does put you in a very dark place. It can take a while to come out of it, but I think ultimately for those of us who are disciples of Jesus, we want to follow him. We want to imitate him as Jesus and the apostles have taught us. Paul said, imitate me even as I imitate Christ. Mm-hmm. So he's our model. And so we look at him, betrayed by Judas, and look at how he reacted to that. He didn't go off on a tirade against Judas. He didn't grab him by the neck and I'm going to nail you before these guys get me. Yeah. I'm taking you out. And none of that. I think he was trying to save Judas. I think it was a calm and impassioned statement when he said, Judas, are you betraying me with a kiss?
Yeah, he calls him friend.
Yeah.
Because Jesus is still his friend.
Yeah, on Jesus' part, he's a friend.
Right.
Jesus is Judas' friend.
That's right.
Now, Judas isn't looking at the relationship that way, but that doesn't change the issue. I am still your friend.
Yeah.
I want to help you. Unfortunately, Judas didn't accept that offer, that desire. I believe he could have been forgiven just as Peter was forgiven.
I do too.
But Jesus accepted it. He was deeply hurt, just as David was deeply hurt by Ahithophel's betrayal, but he gave it into the hands of his Father. He went about serving the Father, tried to reach out to the one betraying him, and I think that's our model. Yes, we're hurt, but if someone, I would hope if I was betrayed in something like that, I would go to them and say, why was this done? What happened?
Yeah.
Because Jesus didn't deserve it. He hadn't, just as David had not done anything to Ahithophel that we know of to deserve that treatment, Jesus had not abused Judas at all. And so that's why, from Jesus' point of view, I'm still your friend.
That's right.
I haven't done anything to deserve this.
That's right.
And yet, so I want to help. I want to help you correct this situation. And that should, as difficult as it may be, and there may be a need for some time to process that, but ultimately, Jesus needs to be our example of how to deal with a situation like that. Yeah. We need to take it to God in prayer. We need to pour it out to Him. We need to seek His strength and His comfort, and do everything we can to be a help in the situation rather than have a Judas attitude. Well, he wronged me in this very deep and private way. Boy, am I going to get him. Yeah. That was not the attitude of Jesus.
That's right. That's exactly right. He's our example, and we've got to look to that. So as damaging as that is, the darkest scenario I think we could think of today of that betrayal in marriage, that if you're the innocent party, then you're right there in the Garden of Gethsemane. Someone's betrayed you, and that is crystal clear. You're walking in the light of God. You're standing in the position of Jesus, and that's in a good place to be. As terrible as the situation is, that's a good place to be. Peter reminds us of that in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 21. For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who when he was reviled did not revile in return, when he suffered he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously. He didn't threaten Judas. He committed himself to God. That was already established in the Garden of Gethsemane in those prayers. If this cup can pass from me, nevertheless, not my will. So that's settled before God, and now he's right where he's supposed to be. And the Son of God is right where he's supposed to be. Judas comes in and plays his part. He hands him over. This is all by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God. And as hard as that is to understand, especially when you're the one suffering, if you are in the right and you're following the Lord, you're standing with Jesus. And that's where all of us need to find ourselves. Like you said, you can always go to the individual and say, I'm just not sure why you've hurt me deeply. You can say those things. But the idea of vengeance and spewing out, anger, and that is not befitting of Jesus and the example that he set.
Yep.
So this is a tough topic, but I'm glad we took some time to look at that moment in time when Judas decided to turn against the Savior of the world. Yep. And as you said, not repent, but commit suicide.
Yeah, terrible end.
Which is an example for what not to do.
But there again was the condition of his heart. He had gotten himself to a point where he somehow just could not bring himself to a godly repentance, to a godly sorrow, as Peter did. He succumbed to a worldly sorrow, and so he took a worldly avenue out.
That's right.
And basically sealed his eternal destiny, and now, because of that, we have in our graphical lexicon the Judas. Yeah. That person is a Judas. And we know exactly what that means. We don't want to be there.
No, don't call me Judas.
Yeah.
That's very, very good thoughts for us today. We're going to do our trivia questions, and I'm nervous as I can be. Kurt, I trust Kurt. He's a friend. I just don't want to be betrayed.
Boy, have I got you in my sights here.
We promise to be nice to each other.
Yeah, this isn't to try to one-up each other. It's just something that's fun, and hopefully will stimulate looking into the Bible.
That's right.
Hey, I didn't know that. Maybe I should look at that. That's really what it's all about, is to encourage reference to the Word of God.
Absolutely. You got your first question? I'll let you go first.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I had 3 questions, but that's okay. It can be 2 because the second and third question were actually back to back, so no problem. Of all the rulers of Judah, there was one queen. Who was she?
This is Judah.
Uh-huh. Who was the only queen of Judah?
Can I ask you a question to kind of make sure I'm thinking of the right person? Was she a grandmother?
Yeah.
This is not a trick question?
No.
Okay.
No,
She
She's-
took the throne.
Yes. She was the child of a king. She was the mother of a king and the wife of a king. So she was used to being royalty.
Yes. And Josiah, is he the one that comes up after her?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I know everybody's name but hers.
You're hitting all around it. you know who she is.
I
but-
do.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tell me her name.
Athaliah.
Athaliah.
Yep.
I was going to say it starts with an A, a W, or a
Yeah.
V, but yeah, because I'm thinking of Vashti from Esther.
From Esther, yeah.
But okay, Athaliah.
Yep.
Yes.
2 Kings 11 and 2 Chronicles 22. She, when her son Jehoram, her son Ahaziah, and her husband Jehoram were killed.
Yeah.
Then she usurped the throne. She ruthlessly had her own children, her own grandchildren, anybody who had a legal hereditary claim to the throne, she got rid of.
Put to death. That's right.
And you wonder, how in the world could she do that? Well, she was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel.
Oh.
So she came by it naturally.
Yeah, she learned those ways early in life, I'm sure.
Evil, evil woman.
Athaliah. Okay.
Yep.
So now you know, dumb it down just a hair. So my first question for you is
Okay.
mostly Old Testament related, but give two other names that the Bible offers to us for the city of Jerusalem. Two other names. There's more than two, but just give me two.
Well, Zion is
That's
one.
Yep.
And there's the derivative, Salem,
That's right.
if it's often referred to.
Yep.
So, did I get it?
Yeah, Salem or Salem is peace. Means
Peace, right.
But yeah, Jerusalem is called Salem as well. It's referred to as the holy city,
Right.
the city of the great king,
Okay,
the city
yeah,
of
there-
God.
Yeah, there are phrases that describe it, but I was trying to think of names, and the only ones I could come up with. It's referred to as Zion because it sits on Mount Zion, of
Yeah.
course. And as you mentioned, the derivative, Salem, or Salem, it is Jerusalem, the city of peace,
And the holy city, the
captured
Bible
by
just
the holy
strictly
city,
calls it the
right.
holy city.
the city of God.
The one I was curious about was Jebus.
Yeah, because it was controlled by the Jebusites before David.
That's right. When David
was able
takes
to
it,
take it. Yeah.
and I looked at it there in 2 Samuel, it refers to it there as Jerusalem, but I think in that moment it was known as Jebus because it had not yet been established.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's a lot of names, but you definitely knocked that one out of the park.
That was a good question. That's a
Oh,
good
thank
one.
you.
Okay, I get my second one.
Okay.
This one deals with Gideon
Okay.
and the army that God raised him up to go after those that were oppressing Israel. We know that he started with 22,000 people. God whittled that down to 10 by just telling them, whoever's fearful, go home.
Right.
But even 10,000 was too many. So, from that 10,000, what number did God whittle that army down to, and how did he do it?
That's two questions.
Okay. What number did he whittle it down to?
I'm just kidding.
I don't want to hammer.
No, it's good. I think the number is brought down to 300.
Correct.
That is the number of men who go into battle with Gideon. The way to get them thinned out that low was the Lord told Gideon to bring them to the water and to drink from the water. And those who knelt down and put both hands in and lapped like a dog, they would be.
Yeah. Well, those who bent over and lapped like a dog.
That's right.
Were excluded.
That's right. I'm
But
saying
those
hands.
who drunk from their hands, they would cup it up and bring it to their mouth while they are still up.
Visually alert.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that were selected. But you're right, 300, and it was the drinking at the stream that God used to signify to Gideon who would be the ones that would fight. So,
Good.
Yep. Good job.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give myself a 50 apparently.
No.
So final question
Okay.
for this show. We were talking about Judas. In John 18, Judas and the cohort of Roman soldiers come to Jesus. And John actually tells us Judas was standing there. So right after that, Jesus says, I'm sorry, yeah, Jesus says, whom do you seek? They say, Jesus of Nazareth. What happened next?
Jesus said, basically, that's me. And they all fell back.
That's right.
Fell on the ground.
Which is interesting because Judas would have fallen down too, because
Yeah,
John says he was standing with them,
Yep.
and they all fell backwards.
Yep.
He said, I am he. They fell down. And you can imagine them
Then he asks it again.
a second time. Yeah.
Who are you seeking?
After they
Jesus
get up.
of Nazareth. I told you I'm he.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Good job. So that ties into Judas, and I think also may help us understand why Peter may have had the nerve or the idea that it's time to go to war. I mean, Jesus just knocked all these soldiers flat to the ground. So, again, that's not in the scriptures, but we wonder about Peter yanking that sword out and hacking off Malchus's ear. But they
And in
all
fact,
fell.
I'll close this with another question. It's not a trivia question, but it's just something that I was thinking about that incident in looking at Judas and the whole thing about them falling down and all that. You look at that whole scene after Jesus comes out of the garden in his passionate prayer to the Father. Who's the one who's in charge? It's always Jesus.
Yeah.
Who are you seeking? Jesus of Nazareth. That's me. They fall down. I asked you again, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. I told you I'm he. Jesus is the one who's in control there, not the
Perfect
mob.
control.
Yeah, not the self-control and control of the whole situation.
Right. Peter jumps out of line. He corrects
He
Peter.
corrects Peter.
And heals Malchus. He's just still in full control. And then he put his hands behind his back so they could bind him.
Yep. He submitted to the whole thing because it is written. It was the will of the Father.
That's what we're going for, right?
Yep.
We're going to be hurt and we're going to be injured, and someone may definitely intentionally expose us in a way that we may not be able to recover from it, and yet he entrusted his soul to the one who judges rightly, to God his Father, and so we've got to do the same, because any other direction is wrong. As far as our own vengeance or trying to make it right under our own terms, it just won't work out the way we think. And that's a great way to finish. We're glad you joined us. We hope you did well on the trivia questions. I'll ask Kurt again privately to be nicer to me, and then we'll work on how we do next week. Have a blessed week. Continue your service to God as He gives you time and ability to do that.